Dear colleagues, good afternoon. Welcome to those of you on site and welcome on the YouTube channel online. I'm very pleased that you take out the time to join us today in our open conversation. An open conversation, just to give you a bit of briefing of what this is, where you find yourself now, is a specific format organized by the Circle U, European University Alliance. And we use open conversations to explore and discuss topical issues of high relevance for the Circle U Alliance community. We do this once in a while, and we feel it is a good day today to have an open conversation. My name is Stefan Breitbach. I'm part of the Circle U community as the Humboldt chair to the CU TIL, the Teaching Innovation Lab. I also function as director of the Professional School of Education at this university, Humboldt-Universität zu Berlin. And I'm proud and very grateful to the members of the Teacher Education Network to be with me today in this room, and also partners from our university partners from Stellenbosch University and the University of the Western Cape in South Africa. Together as a group, we are the HIT Consortium, which is not a newly devised pop band, but it is the project group of the Humboldt International Teacher Training Project. Partners come from the University of Vienna, King's College in London, Humboldt University, the University of Louvain, University of Oslo, as it were, and the two universities in South Africa that I mentioned, and the University of Belgrade. I single out the University of Belgrade for a particular reason. The motto of this open conversation is becoming a teacher in times of democracies under pressure. This motto responds to the increasingly vocalized sentiment that liberal democracies have come under attack from less liberal, autocratic, and authoritarian policies across Europe and even globally. In this sense, today's open conversation is in line with another one that took place roughly a month ago at the University of Belgrade under the title of Academic Freedom Under Pressure. Today, we will shift the focus just slightly to take into view the experiences of students at Circle U universities aspiring to become future teachers, future school teachers. Our open conversation will particularly be dedicated to highlighting the voices of teacher education students from Belgrade. For the past year, many of them have engaged in public protests against government measures to quell openly voiced claims for accountability and transparency following an incident in Novi Sad that caused the death of 16 people when a roof at the local railway station collapsed. Besides other things, these students had to experience what it really means to be studying and preparing to teach in a context of political tension and pressure on democratic institutions. And before we hear from these students directly, it is my great pleasure to give the floor to Professor Niels Pinkwart. He is Vice President of Humboldt-Universität zu Berlin for Academic Affairs, and Professor Pinkwart kindly agreed to give a welcome address on the occasion of our open conversation today. Niels, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Stefan. Well, dear Circle U community here and online, dear members of the Teacher Education Network within Circle U, and dear members of the Humboldt International Teacher Training Projects, dear colleagues, dear students, it is indeed my great pleasure to welcome you for the second time this year to one of these open conversation formats organized by the Teacher Education Network of Circle U. As you all know, the European Circle Alliance Circle U is probably our European project. It's an expression of partnership among 9 European universities, and it is one of the key gateways of Humboldt-University to provide and develop excellence in tertiary education across subjects, across universities, in international collaboration across borders. In these days, we are proud to celebrate the 5th anniversary of Circle U, and some of you have participated in that, and some of you have probably been to Vienna in the last days. With 6 out of 9 universities offering much sought-after programs for future teachers, be it in primary, secondary, or vocational schools, it's certainly fair to say that teacher education plays a vital role in these universities' academic communities. Well, initial teacher education means many things. It means preparing students for and guiding them on their way to become school teachers who can, well, of course, excel in the teaching of their subjects, but maybe at least as importantly, to become responsible educators for young children, adolescents, or young adults. Within Circle U, colleagues who today represent the Teacher Education Network have been active for quite some time, promoting international collaboration with a particular focus on this initial teacher education. In January of this year, we met here at this place for an open conversation where it was about international experience and research engagement for future teachers. Today, we're meeting again, and it's at least as important, another crucially significant issue related to the education of teachers to be. We are discussing today in this open conversation becoming a teacher in times of democracies under pressure. This motto strongly indicates that becoming a teacher is by no means unpolitical. How could it be, given the role of teachers in classrooms? It goes without saying that the values and norms that we expect of future teachers to adhere to are in accordance with the fundamental values of liberal democracies. Using a term by Albert Bandura, we can perhaps call this teachers' moral agency. It will simply not be morally acceptable if teachers promote illiberalism and authoritarianism in their classrooms, not when they are student teachers, and not, of course, when they finally work as qualified teachers eventually. In times when democracies are broadly seen as a desirable thing, and the benefits of democratic governance are tangible for most, if not all members in our societies, it's easy to maintain that teacher education does indeed have an unmistakably political dimension in orienting teachers' moral agency. Yet, we see some questions that are arising. What if the times are changing and become different? What if democracies get under pressure and illiberal political and social thought is on the rise? What principles and values then typically get under pressure in such times? And how can they be defended? And what costs does that bear? Where is the link between these questions and teacher education happening at universities in Europe? And where is the link for universities to maintain a forum for students who engage in politically charged protests that, well, according to some of their vociferous critics, verge on the brink of revolution? We heard it today. It's about 1 year ago that this roof of the railway station of Novi Sad collapsed and 14 people were left dead. In the wake of this tragic event, which caused a national outcry against governmental mismanagement, students of our partner university in Belgrade and students throughout Serbia blocked their faculties in protest against alleged corruption, and they demanded that those in the public administration being responsible for the tragedy should be named and brought to court. The student-led protests quickly gained traction throughout Serbian society and led to major demonstrations of tens of thousands of people across the country. The protests have been going on for a year now, and protesters were increasingly met with repression by riot police, and demeaning rhetoric by state officials. University staff who showed solidarity with the students faced legalistic measures, such as pay cuts by 75% and police interviews. Students were pressurized to return to the classrooms. Let me be very clear about one thing. This open conversation is not about party politics, not in Serbia, not in Germany, and nor elsewhere. Neither does Humboldt-University promote any political party's agenda, nor are we prepared to offer a platform to party politics. We are, however, quite prepared to elevate and to defend what we think of as the very foundation of our own strive for knowledge and truth. This is academic freedom. Academic freedom builds on values such as honesty and integrity, criticality and scrupulousness, and is bolstered by the two principles, transparency and accountability. The exact contact point between our mission here, the academic strive for knowledge and truth, and politics is here. It's the rule of law and the temporal delegation of political power through free and fair elections that serve the purpose of the academy best. We call a system which hinges on these values and principles a democracy. When transparency and accountability come under pressure, so does democracy. And the Circle U partners self-identify as research-intensive universities, which is why everyone here understands the vital importance of academic freedom that rests on these very principles of transparency and accountability. Here at Humboldt-University, about 25% of our students aim to become school teachers in one way or another. In that same sense, everyone should understand the importance of teacher education to secure the existence of academic freedom and, relatedly, of the future of democracy itself. Teachers may not be able to defend either just by themselves, but teachers are needed in the defense of both. Among the students leading the protests in Serbia, there were numerous student teachers. Two of them are here with us today, and they will share with us their thoughts of becoming a teacher in times of democracies under pressure. I believe that the European Parliament has made no mistake in nominating the Serbian students for this year's Sakharov Prize for the freedom of thought. To be more precise, the Serbian students were shortlisted among the 3 finalists for the 2025 award. Even if they did not win the prize by a very small margin, let me remind you that the first laureate in 1988 was no one less than Nelson Mandela. And this maybe bridges to my final words in this greeting. It's a great privilege to welcome you and our guests from also our partner universities in South Africa, and everyone in this room and online to this open conversation on becoming a teacher in times of democracies under pressure in honor of the Serbian students. Thank you very much.
Professor Pinkard, thank you very much for this welcome address. A bit of housekeeping belongs to every open conversation as much as it belongs to every other public event which has a program and an agenda. We will have 2 presentations. We'll in fact have 3 presentations, and they all frame a panel discussion that you can already see. You can see the furnituring for the public panel discussion coming up. And before we enter into this, we will hear 2 presentations, one coming from Anastasia Mitrovic and the other one Vladimir Vojnak. And we'll have a 3rd presentation after the panel discussion coming from John Reuters from University of the West, from Stellenbosch University. How it all began and what it has become. Anastasia Mitrovic is a teacher education student at the Faculty of Education at the University of Belgrade. She's in her second year of her bachelor's studies and has 1 year of political activism and involvement in what has been going on in Belgrade behind her. Thank you very much for coming, and the floor is yours, Anastasia.
Hello, everyone. I'm Anastasia, and I'm a student at the Faculty of Education at University of Belgrade. And today I speak as a future teacher, but also as a person who spent last year in situations that force us to learn what's responsibility, solidarity, and resistance really mean. When I start university, I thought my student life would be peaceful, but this past year taught us something really different. A teacher is not only someone who teaches lessons, but is someone who shows how to stay strong even when it's difficult. I speak as a part of generation that learn about democracy not from books, but from the streets, from in front of faculties and under police lights. We are a generation that know freedom is not a gift. It is something you must protect. I learned this as a future teacher. I have to be brave, because if I do not fight for freedom and justice, I will not be able to teach children about them. It all began on November 1st, when the roof of the Novi Sad railway station collapsed. 16 people died. The station had been opened twice without safety permit, and no one was held responsible. This was not an accident, it was a failure of the system. And because of that, people started going out in the streets, and during a peaceful gathering, a group of students from Faculty of Dramatic Arts was being attacked. That was the moment we understood that silence was no longer an option. By November 25, actually today is an anniversary of this day, we entered faculty blockades, demanding justice and responsibility. In December, the protest grew, and we spent New Year's Eve in streets in silence. A huge sense of solidarity spread. Students, professors, workers, and even high school students stood together. The 3 months after the tragedy, in the middle of the winter, other students and I walked 80 kilometers from Novi Sad to Belgrade to attend a memorial gathering in Novi Sad. This walk showed our strength and determination and gave people hope. That first walk was only one of many others towards freedom and toward other cities where protests were held, like Belgrade, Kragovec, Niš, Novi Pazar, and many, many more. Throughout this year of struggle, thousands of protests and memorials were held across Serbia. It was the purest form of solidarity I have ever seen. That was when I realized that we are not alone in this fight. Sorry. At the same time, Serbia lived in complete media blackout. The police used repression, and many media outlets tried to show us as enemies of the Serbia. And because of that, a group of students rode bicycles from Novi Sad to Strasbourg, and others ran from Novi Sad to Brussels, just so the world could hear what is being silenced here. In the same time, in Belgrade, we blocked Radio Television of Serbia, the main public broadcaster, for 14 days, because we live surrounded by media manipulation. In May, police entered university buildings, used tear gas, and arrested many my college mates, friends, and ordinary citizens. Because committal was being unfairly extended, we blocked the court in Novi Sad for 14 days so that activists and students could defend themselves from freedom. We had to protect not only justice, rights, and education, but also the lives of innocent people. After 6 months of struggle, we understood that the government would not meet our demands. It became clear that the problem did not start on November 1st. It was a result of many years of corruption. In May, we asked for early parliamentary elections. Meanwhile, high school students blocked their schools in support of us, university students. Professors and teachers who supported us didn't get their salaries, and some were fired. This was repression against education and against everyone who learns and everyone who thinks. In June, before the biggest protest in Belgrade, we started 2 online classes to protect the university and the basic income of our professors. The government fell after the violence against female students in January, but the president decided in July to pardon the attackers. At the same time, police violence became a daily part of our peaceful protest. Batons, tear gas, armored vehicles. This became our reality. And while all this happening, we are taking our exams. In the evenings, I stood at the peaceful protests, that ended with arrests and police pressure. In the morning, I went to an exam, and in the afternoon, I waited outside the courthouse for my friends to be released. I'm sorry I didn't change the background. And as the anniversary of tragedy approached, other students and I walked from cities across Serbia to Novi Sad. Students from Novi Pazar walked 16 days for 16 victims, covering 420 kilometers. Our fight is not only against violence and corruption, it is a fight for future generations. Throughout this year, I learned how to teach others, while the system punished me for thinking. I learned that freedom is not a given, it is protected, defended, and shared. Above all, freedom is earned. This year has been full of struggle, violence, and deep sadness, but also a year of solidarity, dignity, and hope. Today, 1 year later, we are still fighting for justice in the street, in schools, and in our classrooms.
Vladimir Vonak is a teacher education student at the Faculty of Education at the University of Belgrade and a research assistant within TNET, that's the Teacher Education Network of Circle U, and he's also a student, an ambassador in Serbia of and for, on behalf of Circle U. Becoming a teacher while being a teacher. This is a reality that many of our teacher education students live. That's a life they choose, some of them have to choose, and some have to do this in times of democracy under pressure. Vladimir.
Well, hello everyone. As Stefan wonderfully introduced me, my name is Vladimir, and I'm a fourth-year student of Faculty of Education. I'm studying to be a primary school teacher. One thing I should say is that I'm also a teacher in a music school. I teach guitar because of the lack of the professors in Serbia for guitar in my place specifically. Keep that in mind, that will be an important thing later. So, my studies and the work that I do in music school are all being done while this is all happening, that Anastasia briefly and very well explained to you. Educational institutions and democratic values in Serbia are really under a visible pressure. Today I would like to present to you what it feels from inside, how a teacher professional identity develops during these times. So, I already started, but I would like to start this slide and start of this presentation with a metaphor. It may seem like a simple one, but it's deeply symbolic. Think of a child that is experiencing bullying in school, and he asks for help of his teacher. The teacher hears it and does nothing. Nothing happens, and the message that student in primary school gets is that his pain is seen, but it's not welcome. His voice, what happened? I don't know. His voice has no authority in that setting. Later, when that child grows up and becomes a teacher, they may find themselves in a similar position. This time, unable to express their disagreement with institutional decisions, because doing so means losing a job. This is a lesson that many of us experience and learn in our very early schooling. It's never taught, it's never written on the table, it's not mentioned in the curriculum, and this is a powerful social pattern that only continues into professional life. The thing that we learn in schools is that silence is often safer than telling truth. Switching my papers, I haven't memorized this. My higher education has taken place during a student-organized blockades, as you heard from Anastasia. Many professors initially supported blockades. We have visitors from outside. And the thing that professor supported us felt really meaningful for us, because we got a picture that we are taught to be open-minded teachers, teachers able to teach younglings to be also very self-thinking, and that they can support their arguments. It encourages us to believe that we should become open-minded educators, able to foster critical thinking in our own classrooms. This was the thing that I was supposed to say, and I read it now. Then professors withdrew, which I understand. Their jobs and the institution, the university, were at risk. After that, the whole semester was done in about 2.5 months, primarily online. Many students accepted this, and I decided not to, because I felt like this is bringing down education to a procedure. This is my opinion. It's maybe not right opinion, but I decided to retake my 4th year of studies. Some of the professors initially supported us, and then when blockades fell, so to say, they immediately started bombarding us with assignments, with tests, with exams, and that felt contradictory. In one way, we should be responsible and thoughtful, but on the other side, we should not question the structure we are learning in. Next slide. I kept my job as a teacher of guitar in music school, and as a big text there says, I'm not proud of it. When teachers in my school began joining protests and blockades, I was faced with a difficult decision. I wanted to speak, I wanted to stand publicly with those asking for change. That means students and professors and the whole community in Serbia. But I also knew that some of my colleagues, students like me who work in a school, who did speak publicly, lost their jobs. And I chose silence. I kept my job, and I'm not proud of that choice. This forced me to acknowledge the gap between the teacher I want to be and the one that the system encourages me to be. And I think many future teachers around me are facing the same dilemma. And I have never felt more ashamed to be called a teacher. That was when I understood how fear enters profession long before we become teachers. When protest is done without knowing why. One of the things that troubled me is that I observed that many teachers in primary schools who participated in school blockades are without having a clear reason why. They did it because everyone else did it. And while the protest was happening, the school students were excluded from any explanation. The professors had no contact with their students, school students, I mean. They were told nothing about the reasons for disruption, the demands or social issues behind it. Then, when the blockade ended, the compressed schedule meant students had to absorb large amount of content in short times, taking multiple tests a day, multiple exams, and this is a thing that many, if not all, students spoke with me because I was the one working during blockades. These students learned that protest equals punishment. The same applied basically on every level of education, but I think that students from primary schools were the most hit ones with it. And just think for a moment, what kind of citizen will they become if every expression of their disagreement is associated with suffering and failure? This is connected to their belief after this much obligations in school, and students that way learned that protests equal punishment. I often felt like I was living two lives at once. During the day, I was a teacher working in school, and in the evenings, I was standing in front of that school protesting with my colleagues, even with some of my students, and with my colleagues from faculty. I felt pulled apart, belonging to both sides, but at the same time to neither one. This tension forced me to ask myself a question: what does it mean to be a teacher in this context, and what kind of teacher I am? Maybe the more important question was what kind of teacher I want to become. So, what I did to make the situation better and to make my choices a little bit more right in this situation. I realized that I couldn't change the political environment and system alone, but what I could change was the thing that I worked in classroom. So I began dedicating 5 to 10 minutes from my class to speak with students about things that surround them, about society, about questions they have. Even though I teach guitar, I felt that is much needed for them because they had no contact with their teachers in their primary school. I was talking to them not to preach, not to persuade them in anything, but to listen to them and to spark new questions in their minds. Over time, I watched my students begin to think more freely, to ask why things are the way they are, to recognize injustice and empathy as part of daily life. And that, to me, felt like reclaiming the meaning of being a teacher, even in a system that prefers silent obedience. And for my closing message, the curriculum may set the content, the institutions may set the structure, but we, teachers, we can shape the space of thinking inside our classrooms. If we teach students only to pursue grades, we will raise citizens who accept that the goal justifies the means. But if we teach them to ask questions, to care, and to understand the world, we nurture individuals capable of participating in democracy and not just living under it. And this is why teacher education matters more than ever. That would be all from me. Thank you, and thanks for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you, both of you. Thank you very much. When planning for this open conversation, we decided that we will not have a question and answer moment after each presentation, but we will have a chance to discuss your contributions, your thoughts, and maybe enrich it with more perspectives from colleagues who work with you and who work in institutions that have their very own history of developing democracies. So it would be great to ask you again to the front, to the stage, and take your seat for the panel discussion. Nevena as well, please, and Claudia, if you don't mind. And of course, Niels. There's besides the colleagues who you have already met, on the panel we have Claudia Mattes, Senior Lecturer at Humboldt-Universität zu Berlin, the Department of Social Studies, and she's Director of the International MA Programs and serves as Humboldt's Academic Chair in the Knowledge Hub on Democracy within Circle U Alliance. Claudia, thank you very much for joining us on the panel. Which is the microphone that I'm using? Is it? So can I actually move away from this one? So I will. We also have Tony Sylvester. Thank you very much for joining the panel. Tony is adjunct lecturer in the Faculty of Education Department and Educational Psychology at the University of the Western Cape in South Africa. He is a registered educational psychologist and has a diverse career as a teacher, educational psychologist, a lecturer, researcher, and career guidance counselor. Thank you very much for being with us. And Nevena Budivaj from the University of Belgrade, associate professor at the Faculty of Education, where she teaches different subjects related to psychology of education, educational psychology, strategies of successful learning, collaboration between teachers and parents. Thank you also, Nevena, for being here. I will keep my position where I am, and please share the microphones amongst you. I would like to take you and everyone through a series of questions. However, if the audience feels that we may be glossing over things too much, please do step in, come up with your own questions and comments, make yourself heard and seen. Though the stage lights up, that makes it a bit more difficult to see what's happening in the auditorium, but still. So, as not to run out of questions, we have, of course, prepared some of them. I would like to turn to Vladimir and Anastasia to kick the discussion off. So the question is behind you. You can't read it, so I will read it to you. Everybody else can, but you can't. What motivates individuals to become teachers today, especially in contexts where democratic culture is uncertain and under pressure?
Hi. Actually, when it's democratic culture feels unstable, that motivates me even more to become a teacher. Before I started university and before a protest, I was thinking a lot, wondering if I want to be a teacher in this kind of system in our country. And I decided that maybe I couldn't change the system, but I couldn't change something in my classroom. And because of that, I decided that I want to become a teacher. And I want to teach children to be brave, responsible, to stand up for themselves and to be empathetic. And then I have to act that way myself. And the unstable situations give me a stronger feeling that teacher can help society, and especially when the things things are difficult. And one situation is very important to me that happened during one protest. Some little girl ran towards me and stood in front of me and say hi and hug me. I didn't know who is she, and said me that she want to become a student when she grow up. And that kind of situations in hard times reminded me that what I'm fighting for, and gave me extra boost of motivations to keep going.
I forgot the question. Okay.
It's about the motivation to become a teacher.
To become teachers today. Well, in my case, a call for a job from a music school motivated me to become a teacher, which is not a great start for being a teacher. But from this perspective, it really catched on my heart, this profession, because I saw that I can change future generations inside my small classroom. I'm not working in a primary school, but even though I'm not working there, I'm promoting culture, and I felt like my obligation is to raise the awareness of my students, even in that young age. So that is the thing that is keeping me interested and involved in being a teacher, and that is my biggest inspiration, so to say. Also, one thing that I saw during my work in music school is that many of teachers that work in schools are not so pedagogically I mean, it's, yeah, they are not very good pedagogicians. it's a hard word to pronounce. I'm still young, and I have to find my strength still to answer to those non-pedagogical things they do. But this is the thing that I have to work on myself, and this is another thing that keeps me going. Thank you.
Thank you very much. For a moment, one could believe that you were studying at a very normal university in very normal times with very normal aspirations as to become a normal professional teacher. Let us stay with the exceptional situation that you lived through for just a moment. I would like to raise the notion of solidarity. Anastasia, you talked about solidarity, and so did you. Vladimir, whose solidarity, when looking back at the situations you found yourself in, whose solidarity did you seek or did you hope for, and whose did you experience, and whose solidarity you had been hoping for may not have been there in spite of your hopes?
Since I'm on several things working, I expect a lot of solidarity in these moments. The one solidarity that I got was from professors on my university. As I said during my presentation, that was really inspiring and really eyes-opening experience. And I still have solidarity from them. From some of them, majority of them. The one solidarity that I seemed that I got, but in the next layer of that solidarity was there was no solidarity, was from my school, and I'm being brave now talking about it. The school leaders in music school where I work always promised that there's a freedom of speech, that we should support students, and it seemed like that. But a year later, I couldn't have imagined that a lot of my colleagues that were students and who protested lost their positions as a teacher in music school, even though they are finishing faculties specifically for music, and I'm not. I'm in a primary school education. So that was heartbreaking to see a lot of my colleagues remaining without job. So that was the places where I didn't get solidarity. The other place where, in my case, that I expected solidarity was a family, my family. And I think I spoke to Anastasia while flying here. And the difference is big between my situation and hers. I didn't get solidarity from my home, so oftenly I would have to, even in this age, because I live with my parents, I would have to lie to them where I was going. It was, and I felt bad for that, but it was easier that way than for them to worry and spark conversations that I didn't really enjoy. I tried to turn them to see the other side of student protest, but that was not successful, at least in my house. So when they say everything comes from a house, that's kind of a true in my situation. But I'm trying to overcome that fear of speaking loudly and expressing my thoughts.
Thank you very much indeed. I would like to turn to Nevena and ask you the following question, maybe to link with what Vladimir just told us. It is about the particular role of universities from your perspective in which ways they should engage with TE. TE is short for teacher education students, so the future teachers, in times of democracy under pressure. So I know from our conversations that you were very close to the students, and this is why I would very much appreciate to hear your view. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, yes, as it was said several times today, we were really standing with them from the very first day of the blockades. And concretely, when we talk about the Faculty for Teacher Education, everyone supported them, even the dean and the vice dean, everyone was supporting their decision to start with the blockades, which was great. There was only one professor who was very loudly expressing his disagreement, and he became the Minister of Education afterwards. I mean, this is just to tell you what we are facing with. Maybe not everyone was really present at the faculty all the time supporting, but at the beginning, a lot of professors was really there, you know, like bringing supplies, donations for students, whatever they needed, or went with them to the streets, protesting with them, engaged with different kinds of activities they organized and so on, or just sitting with them at the faculty. And from my perspective, it was actually crucial for them. I perceived that it was the most important for them when we were just there with them, like sitting, chatting, and spending time with them at the university. But after some months, we all felt a bit, let's say, tired, exhausted, and a little bit lost, you know. And we started to feel like the lack of concentration, of motivation to work, different kinds of psychological issues, like even sleep deprivation. We had huge variations in emotions within a day and so on. And one day there was a conversation at the faculty between students and professors. And some of the professors started talking about these things, and it took students by surprise that we faced the same kind of difficulties, because it was mostly their fight, in the sense we were standing with them, but still they were responsible for the protests and everything. And it took them by surprise that we shared the same kind of issues, and then it took us by surprise that they were surprised by that. And at that point, we decided to organize something we called tea parties. So once a week, more or less, we would just sit in the circle with a cup of warm tea. This warm tea was really important at that moment. It really was an important element. Had some biscuits and just talked, like just shared whatever we feel like, or whatever we think, whatever we hoped for, and so on. And it really became a safe place for everyone to exchange all these feelings and everything. It was such a relief. Sometimes it took us an hour, 2 hours, even more, just to sit and to chat, you know. And as I just heard from Vladimir, I was not aware of this before, that he, for example, didn't have the support of his family. It was the case also with some other students, not only because the parents are afraid, but we have students whose parents, for example, work for the government or even for the main political party fighting against the protests. And still, students go to the streets, you know, so it's from different angles, it can be really, really, really difficult. So these tea parties really became a safe place where we can share how we feel. Sometimes it was really difficult. It was, you know, a lot of people was in tears and so on, but still it was a place where we could also share the hope, the strength, feeling more connected, and so on. Sometimes I brought also psychotherapists with us to these tea sessions, because I'm not a psychotherapist, I'm just a professor of psychology. That was also an interesting experience. In some cases, I also found psychotherapists willing to offer individual psychotherapy to students for free when it was needed. But I have to say that it's not only us supporting students in this situation, but we got a lot of support also from them. And there was one particular moment that was also mentioned during the presentation. Maybe 6 or 7 months after the blockade started, we had to decide whether we will go back to teaching. And it was such a difficult decision. Like, we really felt in the middle of, like, we were really stuck between this position to support our students and to protect also the institution. The university was under the huge pressure for in different ways. Only one of the ways is this financial moment. I'm not talking about our salaries, but the faculties were left without any budget and couldn't really function in that situation. And you can't really stop teaching for 2 years, even if something big like this is happening, you know. And we were in one tea party, and there was one of my colleagues, professor at the teacher education faculty. She was in tears, and I remember her saying, "I am so afraid that we are going to betray our students." And there was a student sitting there with us, and she said, I mean, it was so important. She said, "No, you will never be a betrayer for me. I will always look at you as a person who supported me when it was the most important for me." And then she was pointing at all professors sitting there, like, you and you and you will never be a betrayer for me. And for example, that was so important for me personally, but also for my colleagues. So what I want to say is that it was really a mutual support among us. I mean, I can't say that we supported them, but we got a lot of support as well from them.
Nevena, thank you very much. I would like to link with the thought that you expressed last, and move to our other panelists by I think, even by a very simple trick of language. We at the university can have very easy ways out of a situation where we don't have to perceive ourselves as teachers. So we can be directors, we can be professors, we can be presidents, and do all sorts of nice things. What if we can consider ourselves teachers? Are we not in a similar way or in a different way? Are we perhaps also teachers? The German equivalent to the word university, or the alternative word, is Hochschule, which has the word school in it, schooling education. So can we also consider ourselves as educators? And if so, so we turn to this question perhaps again, what is the role for universities and the people who work in the universities, all the directors and professors and presidents, and you name them as educators? How do we preferably interact with our students who we have, I think by now understood, have a very clear understanding of their own profession and where they want to go, which is teaching, school teaching, educating young people. Maybe we turn to Tony first and have the microphone passed down my way to Niels and Claudia.
I would say teachers. Who are we? First of all, we have chosen the profession to guide and to capacitate young people in order to have a voice and agency so that they can partake in a democracy. And for me, that is very important, that I've got to give my students a voice to be able to participate, first of all. Because if I'm not going to be there to be a leader, to understand where they're at, but also look at where I come from and what I bring to that equation. And I'm just going to say that many of what was shared here this morning alludes to what my colleague will hopefully speak with this afternoon, because this is where we come from. And we, with that negative experiences that we've had coming into a classroom, which is so diverse, we now have to embrace every single individual, irrespective of what I come from or where I come from, is important. So I have to, first of all, go within myself and say, who am I? What do I bring? And how can I mold this individual to become a teacher in the respect of building, capacitating, and sharing their knowledge to build a better. And in order to do that, I have to be able to build a society or a citizen that is able to think critically, to be independent, and to be resilient. And I think that is my duty as a teacher, to build that citizen that can partake in a democracy with those skills. And that should be exercised in the classrooms. The skills I'm talking about should be exercised in the classroom where the teacher takes the lead. Thank you.
Well, research and teaching certainly belong together in a university. And as Vice President for Academic Affairs, I couldn't, strengthen this more. Of course, we are all teachers here. The German, you say we are Hochschule, but the professors also have the title Hochschullehrer. So it's really embedded in the professional description what we do here. But still, there are, of course, various levels. You have this individual level in which our university teachers have to respond, have to position themselves in times of such crisis, because there is no non-reaction that you can give. But it's a more multifaceted thing. As a university teacher, you're also, and we heard that you're part of a school in which you have certain options that you maybe cannot do alone as a single teacher, but that you can or cannot do in your faculty. And then again, there is the overall university leadership, which also has a position to position the school or the whole university in a direction, to give guidance, and also to have political positionings. So there are a number of layers in which also individual teachers, but also the collection of teachers can react. And I guess that is also important. Well, and then there is also one dimension which has not been mentioned so far, but in a way you already did, but we also have educational programs which our teachers are responsible for setting up. Of course, it's not in that very moment of a protest that you think of your future educational programs, certainly not. But as an institution, we have the responsibility of also addressing that way, to thinking ahead and say, well, we have this immediate learning here. How do we prepare our future students, whether they be teacher students or other students, to better be prepared for these times of crisis? So there are multiple ways in which you can answer, and probably have to answer that question.
Yes, and maybe adding on to this, so I'm not teaching students who want to become a teacher. Of course, you could do when you study political science, but we have some other experts in our department who do that. So therefore, I don't always know what my students will do in their future professional life, and therefore, sometimes we are rather inclined to teach them facts, figures, certain skills, and so on. So sometimes also this, even though we do social sciences, and therefore, and I also do research on democracy, therefore, of course, this is, so to say, an overarching topic, but sometimes in your everyday coursework, you rather look into these more, let's say, the basic learning stuff. And then we need to remind us very often that all that we are doing, and also what you have described so vividly, that it is very much about social trust, that we are in a social relationship with each other. And ideally, if we also get to know each other a little bit, you now had a very extreme situation, and with your tea parties, I think you got to know each other very well. This does not always happen in a university context, unfortunately, but really seeing this interaction as a social interaction and a situation where mutual trust is important, I think this is something that we should also remind us, because maybe we will get to this point later. I mean, also we are facing certain challenges in a changing political climate also here in Germany. So, but maybe this is something for later.
Well, maybe not. maybe we can turn to this question right away, because to me it seems a highly relevant one. And the lead in to this question could be a slight variation of question number 5, which reads on the slide: has the past year changed how you understand your own role as educators and teacher educators within the university? Within the past, this is clearly geared to the wording of the question to the Serbian experience. However, since we are Circle U and tend to consider or would like to think of ourselves as a university family, has the past year, where our Serbian family members have gone through a difficult period, has this changed our own outlook on how we think of ourselves as educators and teachers? And perhaps by variation of the same question, has the enormous challenge to build a country based on democratic principles like South Africa, has this changed a professional outlook in the past years? And since I took the liberty to spontaneously reformulate a question, I will not be able to point to you. I can't do this. Please, yes, thank you very much, Niels. Thank you.
I can start, and maybe I open it. I reformulate your question as per your invitation. And looking back, maybe 4 years, which is the term that I've now been serving as vice president, and Humboldt-University in Berlin is really also a part where it's a very political location, and there have been numerous protests, blockades, and many things. Just for those who don't read Berlin newspapers every day, it has, in the last years, it has, among others, been about climate protests. It has about inviting or not inviting speakers who are of a different party to events here, even from those parties or from those political backgrounds who, well, are perceived as a threat to democracy, whether they should have a right to speak or not. And then it's the war in Ukraine, and of course, very prominently, not only here, I know, it's Israel and Palestine. It has led to many things here, including the destruction of institutes and many others, and you can share it. So there is always, as a university leadership, and this has shaped my thinking also, what it means to be in this position, and also for the teacher education, also in the sense that we also have higher education teachers, that thinking, well, where is freedom of speech? Where does it end? And what does this have to do with another important element, this academic freedom, which is not the same as this freedom of speech, but thinking about these terms and then positioning the university and giving guidance to what is acceptable, and where you then, if it is acceptable, fully support the students and encourage them to do that, but on the other hand, also to say, no, these are the things where borders have been crossed. Because then, after all, it's this political positioning which then also probably has to feed into our educational programs in democracy education, but it's also the positioning of the university leadership, of the university itself, of the schools, and then supporting those who finally do the tea parties or rebuild the institute. And maybe you can share some of that.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I really want to comment on this, but maybe at least insofar as, so we had an occupation last May, so in May 2024, from a group called Student Coalition Berlin, and their aim was to, let's say, talk about various issues related to the war in Gaza and the role of Humboldt-University and what it can do. Maybe we can frame it this way. What was, at least, I was also part of a group of people who went into the building after the occupation to talk with the people being present. And what I can at least say, as maybe aside of the destructions and so on, but maybe one positive aspect also was that for a certain time we did have a conversation, And I think this is maybe indeed a very important lesson that one should always try. And I was also very grateful for our president that she was so brave to say, yes, we should enter into a discussion. And she received a lot of political backfiring for this decision. But first of all, to try to talk and to understand each other. And I think in these times when also here in Germany, I mean, when we look at voting behavior of younger people, these are people sitting in our classrooms. And I also know from colleagues with whom I'm in close contact in Georgia, in Turkey, in the United States, sometimes you describe a situation of solidarity, but sometimes my colleagues are afraid of their students because they don't know if they are taping them with a phone, what they will do with what, as you also explained, as your role as a teacher. So if someone is really outspoken in the classroom, what it means to them. And therefore, I think it is really so important to always remind us that we should first of all talk, listen to each other, try to be honest, and to also somehow keep this academic freedom inside our institutions by all these various positions that we can have in political respects, but not to try to betray among us. And so far for now, maybe.
These questions I pose to my students who've just come back after their first year of teaching practice. So you must understand that in the South African context, there's diversity throughout. And many of them have not been in certain context. And to understand a learner, you need to understand the context. The point of your departure should be context fitted within the curriculum. So for them, some of the contexts were completely new. And many of them said that for the first time, inequalities became a reality, not just a textbook affair. They also spoke about things like overcrowded classrooms, lack of resources, dysfunctional families, and also things like communities in turmoil, and listening to debates on race, gender, differences in the staff rooms and also amongst their colleagues. They also said that teaching is politics, even when we don't want it to be, because they were exposed to that every day, listening to different people's ideas. They spoke about things like they also became, they carry emotional labor, having to be there for a child that comes from a gender-based violence family, a dysfunctional family, a child who's been traumatized, a child who's been sexually abused, a child who comes from a violent an environment, a community where there's gangs and gangsterism. So they've got to be that safe haven for that child. And that was also became a reality for them because some of them don't come from such environments. They also spoke about the thing of preparing. A teacher is not only prepared to teach, but also preparing to lead. That is what they said. And also the impact and outlook on the future. They said the teaching, or what they saw that they were more, they felt that they now became advocates for social justice and not only deliverers of knowledge. And it was, just from linking it to you, these are things that our teachers deal with on a daily basis. Going into a classroom, first of all, your first half an hour is just to attend to a child that's coming to a classroom, maybe where there was a gang shooting, walking past somebody who's been shot, lying on the pavement there. So this is our reality. And so how do our teachers cope with it on a daily basis and still having to carry over the knowledge that these kids need to carry on? Thank you.
Well, I can briefly. One thing that really didn't change my mind in its core, but opened my eyes a little bit wider, was this happenings in Serbia. But when one of my students asked me, "What's this noise outside?" I was kind of shocked in that moment. Because he didn't know that people are for months and months walking, running, going by bicycling, through Serbia to show their disappointment and disagreement with government and governing. So this student, I took him outside, I showed him, I explained to him, and it really occurred to me a thought that in primary schools, my primary school, I didn't really study any civic education subject, even though I have it in my curriculum. It was held, but usually with professors that are not competent for that, and usually it's professors who need some percentage of their class to fill, to work fully. So that is one theme that started interesting me more and more since that student asked me that. So I'm happy to work with you people, and I think that in future this will be a question, and I mean not in future, even now it's a question that needs to be answered, and I think to work on, basically. Yeah.
Yes, I can say that the last year definitely changed the way I understand my role as a teacher educator, and I should thank our students for that, actually. And as Vladimir said during his presentation, or at least that's how I understood it, we have a responsibility to raise a generation of professionals who perceive social and political processes and who are ready to be active in influencing it. And what we learned from this crisis in Serbia is that the university and other educational institutions can be actually the leaders of social movements. And what we have now in Serbia is that the academic community became the institution with the most trust in society. And I think it's really crucial, you know. And I have just two small examples from the last year I want to share with you just to illustrate this. There was one moment during last winter when this protest started to spread from the universities to schools, and Vladimir also spoke about that. And in order to prevent this spreading, the government just decided to close the schools, to actually announce the winter break 1 week before it was supposed to start. So we all heard it from the media, even students and teachers. It was just like, from tomorrow you don't go to school. So even if the winter break was supposed to start 1 week later, you know. But at that moment, the teachers and the parents and the students said, no, you can't do that. You can't prevent us from going to school. These are our schools. And we had schools that continued working for that additional week, which is really, I mean, it's amazing when you think. I mean, it's such a power in that small sentence like, these are our schools. You can't prevent us from going to school. And I think it never happened before. But in this situation, we had this kind of response, you know. And the other example I wanted to share is that our faculty was not really well known before these blockades. Like, a lot of people don't even know the address, like we are not on the map. They don't even know that the teacher faculty exists, or they know but not really sure where they can find it, and so on. So we have like much bigger faculties, well-known faculties, and even people, citizens, bringing donations for students at the end of blockades, went to all other faculties. Of course, the solidarity of students was great, so they all shared everything. But even students from other faculties were not aware of our faculty. And our students were quite frustrated because of that. And they kept explaining to their colleagues from other faculty that teachers are really crucial for every society and for every single person, and that you can't really have a strong university without strong teacher faculty, and that you can't really have a society without good teachers, you know. So they kept explaining, and being so proud that they are going to become teachers. So finally, they all started calling them teachers, like using this label instead of their personal names, even, you know, in some chats or even during their meetings during blockades, they wouldn't use like Anastasia's first name to address her, but said, "Hey, teacher, what do you think about this or that?" And I really like that. I mean, we can say that these two examples are just some small examples, not so important, but I think that they really bring this important message and the important attitude that we have to nurture and to really, you know, care about. That in the times of crisis, institutional, educational institutions can play these very important roles, and that we are, let's say, obliged, or even obliged, to take it into account when we rethink our role as future teacher educators. So I think that we really learned a lot from this crisis, and that we really changed the way we understand our jobs. Thank you.
Thank you all very much indeed. This is the most unpopular moment in any panel discussion which has evolved and developed into such a wonderful conversation, to call for time. So it's my job now to thank you. Please, if you don't mind, could you just stay on the stage? We'll hear the presentation from John and concluding remarks afterwards. We'll be hard-pressed to finish exactly on time, but perhaps we're around 3 o'clock, well, was it 3:30-ish? And we think we have a bit of time afterwards, once everybody has a chance to say goodbye and go to do their business. Those of you who would like to stay, we're quite well prepared to take your questions afterwards in informal conversations. So this is by no means meant to be the end of this panel discussion. Thank you very much. And now it is, look, I will skip a few slides. There we are. John Rogers from Stellenbosch University, Reflections on the Case of South Africa, Teacher Education in Emerging Democracies. John, where are you?
Thank you, Stefan. Thank you. Welcome, colleagues, students, panel members. Firstly, thank you to Vladimir and Anastasia, Navina and Anya for bringing to us, your incredible struggles. I think it evokes historical trauma almost in all the three of us who have been through similar experiences. So I can safely say we stand by you, we support you, and we'll let all of our colleagues know about this. In preparing for this particular presentation, I tried to think ahead of how do we change things. And so I'm going to take you through the experience of South Africa, the new democracy. And I have to say from the start that the word democracy has become a very slippery word. My late colleague Liz Langer, who passed away very, very recently, she was the head of quality assurance at the Council for Higher Education, originally from Argentina, described democracy as the president's wife has 5,000 pairs of designer shoes which he has never worn in a cupboard bought on the state's expense. Okay, and so if you remember the story of Imelda Marcos, you will remember the issue of corruption in democracies is not a new thing. In America, you had universities under pressure at the whim of a president and what is now known as auto-pen democracy. In South Africa, and I'm going to take you through that journey now, we haven't been immune to the types of, the types of issues that impact negatively on the lives of people and on the lives of universities, faculty members, and students who aspire to become teachers just like we did when we were young. So, Crane Sodine describes the post-apartheid aims that are so eloquently and beautifully written up in our Constitution, that there were three things that would impact on the lives of people, and that is that they would be free, that there should be democracy, there should be equity, and there should be access. So in the higher institution climate, where you previously had black and white universities, and UWC is an example of that, they were a university created for people of color. And this had to change. And I can say, and I said it in the lecture series as well, this freedom came in 1994. At my own institution, 20 years later, in 2014, the policy had not changed. And so Afrikaans was the primary language that you had to be able to speak Afrikaans to gain access to Stellenbosch University, which meant most black students who didn't speak it were excluded. And so this changed 20 years after one of the most liberal constitutions that assured or promised a new life for all was written and accepted. So that equity and participation, Crane Sodine says that these were some of the big post-apartheid aims. But we had persistent inequalities. Nick Spaull is an economist at Stellenbosch University, and he reviewed South Africa's performances in the PIRLS test and looked at the literacy levels of young learners in South Africa who exit the foundation phase. And what we found in 2016 was that 3 out of 4 learners emerging from grade 3 could not read with understanding. The most recent PIRLS test in 2023 showed that now 4 out of 5, so it's moved up to 80%. Okay? And so this is not the freedom that we fought for all these years. And so we have this persistent inequality in the education system. And so this inequality is structural. You have your spatial legacies, white schools, your Group Areas Act, and your separate development, and the fallout from that. So you have township rural schools that are under-resourced. In terms of funding equality, schools are classified in terms of quintiles. So a quintile 1 school would be a school where the community is, in dire poverty. And so they get money from the state, but it's never enough. And so you never compare with your established schools who historically were well run and who have access to the systems and the structures of wealth in the country. And so you have that continued inequality within the system. So wealthy schools are able to supplement funding privately. And so if you go to South Africa and if you go to certain schools, they look like the grammar schools in England. They have 8 rugby fields, they have astroturfs, they have cricket pitches, they own houses and buildings around them. One school in Stellenbosch sold a painting by Irma Stern the other day, and it sold for almost 2.8 million in what's that auction house in London? Yes. Okay, and so that's the type of wealth that exists, and that is the type of inequality that you have in the system. In terms of the Department of Basic Education, another one of our colleagues, Jonathan Johnson, argued in 2012 that if we're in a democracy, why is all the decision-making so centralized within the Department of Education? So where's this notion of school decision-making and academic freedom? And so with the development of school governing bodies and developing their capacity across various communities, you still have that inequality. Because One student once told me, "Sir, in my community, hardly anyone ever completed school. So as a first-year student at university, they see me as a professor in the community. And so they don't even trust their own decision-making. And so they are led by principals and teachers who sometimes are unscrupulous." So in terms of language policy, you still have English dominance after grade 4. So indigenous languages are still overlooked as media of instruction and are undervalued. And so one of the big contestations in our government of national unity currently is the idea of mother tongue-based education. And so one big partner in the government of national unity, your Democratic Alliance, says, no, we cannot implement this because their voters say, oh, but this will change the face of Afrikaans schools. This will be a disaster for us. And at the same time, my honor students say, sir, this school down the road, there are 15 kids in a classroom, and I sit with 80 kids in my classroom. How is that fair? So this whole notion of mother tongue-based education, which is a crucial psycholinguistic need in the country, actually splits your government apart. So you have threats to the stability within the country because of that. Right, then you have your teachers' union influence in appointments at schools. So it's a unique situation there also. Teacher unions advocate for the rights of teachers, but they have become so powerful that they also now begin to determine who gets appointed where. Okay, so your affiliations to teacher unions become important. So you can see how when you have instability and you have corruption, further down the system begins to fall flat as well, even at the level of the school. We have school violence, gang activity, very prevalent in the Western Cape. Bullying, recent cases, rugby players beating up, a young kid at a school in Milnerton. Gender-based violence. Some schools, especially in the rural areas, still practice corporal punishment, even though it's illegal. And then in 2007, Prince Lou wrote about the inconsistent implementation of the life orientation, implementation. It has improved significantly since, but this is the very subject that is supposed to teach people about their rights, okay? About the civic freedoms that they should be enjoying. And it's not treated as probably what should be one of the most important subjects in their schooling career. There's digital divide in terms of connectivity and access to devices. And of course, digital literacy is uneven across schools and even uneven across universities. At Stellenbosch University, all students have access to a laptop. It's not the same at the University of the Western Cape, and we're quite close to each other. In terms of leadership and governments, you have irregular appointments and corruption, weak oversight structures, and then, of course, socio-economic barriers, poverty, hunger, historical trauma, and this, of course, limits learner participation in the classroom. So in almost every area, you have school feeding programs, again, subject, again, to corruption. The Bella Bill, which is one of your more controversial bills in South Africa, the Basic Education Laws Amendment Bill, attempted to shift the whole idea of transformation within the schooling system. And as I said, this has been a highly contested bill, shift in the admission patterns, but also in terms of determining language policy, which moves away from the governing body to the head of department in a particular province. And that was gazetted in 2023, but hasn't been implemented yet because of the contestation. So the intention was to reduce inclusion, but also to increase consistency across the system. The concern raised was that your SGB or your decentralized democratic structures now become weakened, okay? So how do we begin to deal with all of this inequality? How do we deal with this particularly oppressive environment that teachers have to enter into? My colleague Aslam Fatah, and I spoke to him on text earlier on, saying, actually, I've drawn all of your papers on contrapuntal curricula into the presentation. The word contrapuntal is a music term, Vladimir. So it's a counterpoint. Yeah, where you bring two things together. Yes, lovely. And so what Aslam, who's been working in higher education transformation for a long time, says that if you really want to change things, you have to change them at the level of what students experience in the classroom. Okay? So you have to look at the curriculum, have a look at the knowledge and knowledges, look at what is valued and what is not, and then begin to honor what he calls the multiple identities that you have within the classroom. Enforce democratic value, center the marginal voices, and make everybody feel that they belong. And so his charge is to create a curriculum that advances democracy, ethical being, criticality, and social justice. And so when we think about the Serbian situation, okay, Nelson Mandela's and this experience in South Africa taught us that fighting against structures is a long and arduous journey. And the one thing that always, kept the country going was this belief that life will be better in the future. And for many, it meant, become emotional when I talk about this. For many, it meant that they might not be there. Some, they fall by the wayside, yeah. And we always have to honor them. So, let me just compose myself, forgive me. Okay, I'll be okay. So what must curricula do? It must cultivate that ethical, relational citizenship, okay? And so that is what Said refers to in his charge in how we begin to use and think of language ethically. In my own practice, I share two examples of this contrapuntality, how we bring things that are opposed together. So in the first year program on English language, literature and literacies, when we dealt with poetry, we looked at a juxtaposition of text, both Shakespearean, Shelley's Ozymandias, Lycidas, all deal with this issue of memory and legacy. And we juxtapose a rap artist, youngster CPT, look at Weskaap is Western Cape, okay, it's in Afrikaans, but the song is in, the Cape vernacular, which is, a mixture of English and Afrikaans. And what he sings about or raps about in Weskaap is this whole legacy and history of the local communities that had been erased by apartheid. There are no monuments in areas in the Cape Flats that honor, people. There are no monuments. There are no buildings that carry their names. Some street names now, okay? But in his rap, he begins to sustain this memory, okay? Rewrites this memory as a legacy for people who will now listen to that, as a counterpoint to your dominant texts, okay? And so this post-colonial text reclaims the local history that was erased through apartheid. And the second one, Lycidas, which is part of that particular set of poems, is a very difficult 17th century poem for South African students. I know I struggled with it when I did it as a student. But we draw on, the trans-languaging mode to make this not only accessible. So I gave students the original text. I used AI generatively here to translate it into everyday language, and then also translate it into COPS. So they have 3 versions, which almost gives them immediate access to what the poem is about. It wasn't only about that, okay? It was about using trans-language to the mode as a counterpoint to the 17th century language of Milton. And so what students then did was to work in recursive ways from the one to the other, but also begin to explore what are your own local metaphors and images that you use in the community to honor and praise individuals. And so what this does is it begins to validate both and affirm the students, but also their histories, and affirms them as beings from a particular community that is very often not viewed as, in terms of your high-flowing Shakespearean and others. And so what are the implications for democracy in South Africa? Certainly there's this tension between, do we centralize or do we create equity and have schools decide, or do we let the department decide? So what does contrapuntality do? It fosters inclusivity, critical citizenship, okay? And it emphasizes that an ethical education requires diversity, it requires justice, and requires participation. And of course, there's another part to it, okay? The whole nature of contrapuntality must be that there's an ontological change in the people who experience the education, that they must become someone new, okay? And this is often, when we think about teaching and learning, one of the more difficult areas that we negotiate. So in conclusion, we still experience inequality after 30 years of democracy. Reform efforts are ongoing. Democratic schooling, we argue, demands voice, accountability, and an ethical curricular design. And so once you have that in place, you ensure that successive students who go through that particular system develop a voice, understand what social justice means, understand what their freedoms and democratic rights are, develop a moral stance and become critical thinkers, but more so also become people with integrity, like our students here, who stand up for what they believe in. And that, I propose, is how we begin to think about how we change systems of oppression and inequality. Thank you.
John, thank you ever so much. We're running right behind time, so I think I need to ask our panelists, do you still have time to stay to the formal end, if they should be different? I'm looking at our president, who may have 5 minutes. We have a few concluding remarks coming from Christina Richardson and Christiane Georgian-Poffer from the Teacher Education Network of Circle U, if that's... Thank you.
After this intense conversation and John's words now, I thought yours were very nice concluding remarks. Very briefly.
Yeah, so I just wanted to say how powerful this open conversation has been, and particularly wanted to thank the students and staff in Belgrade for having the courage to speak up on these really, really important issues. So I think that's the first thing I'd like to say. I'd also like to say, again, quite briefly, that for me, the open conversation has really highlighted the importance of the wider role of the teacher in society and the implications for teacher education. And if we think about that in the context of today's conversation, for me, the work of scholar and activist Bell Hooks comes to mind, and her thinking, and those of others, around teachers as democracy workers. And this also kind of brings to mind her thinking around the conceptualization or concept of education as the practice of freedom, whereby teachers act as agents of social and political transformation. And teachers can not only model democracy themselves in their classroom practices, but also see their classrooms as a radical space for cultivating the critical consciousness necessary for a just and democratic society. On that note, I'll hand over to Christiana.
Yeah, just one word, if you'll bear with me. As a member of Tenet, I'm hugely thankful to be able to have these exchanges with people from so many different places. I feel that in the Western European countries, at least, we are slowly, strugglingly awaking from a kind of dream, the dream of democracy as, John, what do you say? Freedom, equity, access that seem to be just there to grow and spread. And we are living now this experience that it's not like that. And that, of course, has repercussions for how we have to act in our teacher education programs, which are full of contradictions in any case, but they are just boiling up really now. And one has to rise to the occasion, and this is what I see our South African colleagues and our Serbian colleagues do. And from a very personal note, I'll finish on this very personal note now. I've been following the news. In Vienna, we're a bit closer to Belgrade than in other places. I've been exchanging with my colleagues in Belgrade, and I just would like to express my deepest respect to all of you for your courage, your energy, your resilience, determination and endurance, and your continuing hope. And this is also my hope that more of us will rise up to the occasion when the occasion comes, which will probably come soon. Thank you.